We talked about that arbitrage thing,
Hmm.
and for the listeners who don't know, what you do is you don't need to own the real estate property, but you just call up the landlord and say, hey man, this sounds crazy, but I'm gonna like rent your property out on Airbnb as a short-term rental. But the cool thing is I'm gonna clean it up every other day for you.
This is a story about a dude named Lane. Then one day he went and tried to rent them out, and then he became one real investor man.
That, there was a business on top of real estate, and I don't know, it's something about it just struck me as something that I wanted to try out and do. And in one of the benefits was, of course, higher return, from a cash flow standpoint.
Couple of things that kind of come to mind that people have told me is, you're working with better people. You don't have to worry about people not paying because they pay up front.
Right.
You don't have to worry about that payment system because the websites kind of do it for you. Although you should probably try and wean yourself off of the platforms and build your own clientele. But then the nice thing is, like, when in my world, when the phone rings, it's usually something bad, right? Something's broken and you got to pay $500 or a couple thousand
Mm-hmm.
bucks. But every time your phone rings, it's like it's for something happy, right? Like you get that
Yeah.
coming up.
It's funny because I think my wife has so my wife does the day-to-day communications, and she's excellent at it, communicating with the guests. And the amazing thing is really you could do it over your smartphone, and a lot of people do it remotely as long as they have a team in place. So my wife will have a specific ringtone, and when it rings, it's usually a notification from Airbnb and VRBO, oftentimes a booking. So I'm like, did you just get a booking? So it's kind of an ongoing joke for us.
So some of the bad things are, here in Hawaii, the local people can't buy houses. So there's big government legislature to kind of block this stuff in non-tourist areas, which I think is probably the right thing that should happen. If not, it's going to drive the price of homes up because people are just going to try and buy short-term rentals in Hawaii, and then all the locals get displaced even more. But what are some of the downsides you're seeing? Like we talked about that arbitrage thing,
Mm-hmm.
and for the listeners who don't know, what you do is you don't need to own the real estate property, but you just call up the landlord and say, hey man, this sounds crazy, but I'm gonna like rent your property out on Airbnb as a short-term rental. But the cool thing is I'm gonna clean it up every other day for you.
And some people are doing that, and the benefit of that is you can offer that landlord some kind of a premium, right? If, let's say their unit rents for $2,000 a month, you can offer them $2,200, and they know they're going to have 100% occupancy. So there are certainly benefits to the landlord when you do it that way. I would say, if you do it, let's say, my way, so to speak. So if you have one house that's your own that you are already Airbnb-ing, I think your ability to convince a landlord that what you're doing is going to be higher. Because if I want to go and now move into that rental arbitrage game, I don't just talk to a renter or to a landlord and try and convince him. I can shoot him over, my listings that are currently there, which are amazing luxury listings. I can have him come to my house and tour it and see exactly how clean and well taken care of it is. And so I think if you want to do that game, it might even be to your benefit to start off with one that you own, and get that under your belt. And then you can, move on and rental arbitrage the others.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one thing that kind of concerns me, and from when I look into investments, I like investments that aren't available to the general public.
Mm-hmm.
The arbitrage thing is definitely available to the kid that lives in their mother's basement. At some point, the kids in their mother's basement army will find out about this and start doing it. But what are the risks that you kind of see that are maybe concerning for someone who's kind of in the business, as opposed to me that just kind of
Sure. So I think one risk, obviously, as you kind of alluded to, is the risk with government regulation. And so you want to be very, very smart about how you do that. For example, I'm in Texas. My Airbnbs are here in Texas, and the Texas Supreme Court last year passed a ruling that sided with homeowners and property rights. and saying that HOAs cannot take away your ability to do a short-term rental. So stuff like that's important. The other risk is, as you mentioned, is the risk of the platforms. So not being completely beholden to Airbnb or VRBO or some of the other platforms. So what we're in the process of doing right now is moving to some software that will streamline our ability to take bookings directly on our own website. And so I already kind of have a plan in place about reaching out to some local businesses and letting them know that our house is available and offering discounts and doing things that way. So to give you an example, we had somebody book from the local church, and they booked through the platform, but we found out that they were coming for a church conference. So I can go to that local church and say, hey, you can book directly here. I'll give your members 10% off with this promo code. There are a couple of new hospitals that are coming into the area. We've had families who have had kids coming in for surgery. They're coming from out of town for surgery. They're coming with other kids. They don't want to stay a week in a hotel when they're tending to a kid that's just had surgery. They want a home. And so we're able to provide that for them. So there's different ways to take away some of those risks. But I think the really long-term picture is that short-term rental is here to stay. I think it provides a different need. So for example, I've got 3 small kids. When we travel on vacation, I don't want a hotel room. I want a house because I want to be able to put my small kid into a different room, put him off to sleep when he's ready for sleep, and then still be able to enjoy the home. I want to have a kitchen where we can cook and defray some of those costs of traveling and just have a home cooked meal. So I think the short-term rental game is here to stay. Now, it might go through some regulation. It might go through some changes in law. But I think this gig economy, once people see what's available, I don't think there's any going back. And it'd be interesting to look at some of the numbers you were talking about, the concerns about driving prices up. I think what'll happen is eventually it's a supply and demand thing, right? You're going to find an equilibrium because that's the way free markets work. In my local area, I think there's about 100 homes that are on Airbnb right now, and there's thousands and thousands and thousands of homes that are available, and that number is growing. So I think probably for most large markets, if you look at the actual numbers, the number of properties that are on short-term rental, they get a lot of publicity in the news, but it's probably a very small percentage of the actual available stock of homes.
Right. I think you and I are quite extreme markets, right? Like, I mean, Dallas is very pro business. It
Mm-hmm.
makes sense that they'd be all for this. Whereas I think Hawaii,
very different,
very conservative. The hotel industry is very strong. Some things I look at, like, and if you follow like how Asia's, Airbnb in Asia is being done. I mean, there are a lot of places are just flat out blocking it because I think there it's like the wealth gap is a lot larger in America.
Mm-hmm.
The 1% is just way more stronger than everybody else, more so than here, and they're just going to be kind of like how you're doing. Well, we're just going to go buy a bunch of properties, drive the prices up, and the locals can't even buy it anyway, and just bring it up on them. Be interesting how this all plays out, right? Like,
yeah, it is interesting because I think you block it and it'll go underground. Like, I've been reading on different sites related to short-term industry about software coming out where, your house isn't even posted on Airbnb during quote unquote working hours when the city officials are there scouring the listing. So it's such a cat and mouse game. I think in the end, they'll find a way to, make it, put in some meaningful laws that protect people that need to be protected, protect the local neighborhoods, but at the same time allow this to be done in a way that is meaningful and beneficial.
I mean, I agree with you. Whenever I go traveling, I go Airbnbs. I mean, I don't want to pay $300 for a hotel and then on the $100 resort fee. I mean,